everyone, it's Raghu back with Mindrolling, and I have with me Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross. Hi, how are you? Welcome. They have put together a fascinating book, Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. So I'm really happy there's some great juicy things and choice writing in this book. So we have a bunch of stuff that we can talk about. I just wanted to mention, because I'm reading the Times, New York Times today. I only read the headlines about the stuff that we are really upset about. But there, you know who Ezra Klein is? He's a great podcaster, and he writes opinion stuff for the Times. Anyhow, he wanted to get away from all the political stuff and all that, so he brought someone on his show that it really fits with what this book is. Brian Eno. Do you know Brian?
Oh, of course, yes. Love him and his work.
Yeah. So I thought, wow, this is really synchronicity. Let me just read a little of it so you can get a feel for it. I've actually thought that art is actually one of the most important things that humans do with their time. In my book, there's a long list of things that I consider could come under the headline of art. It includes, of course, obvious things, symphonies, photographs, paintings, but it also includes cardigans and jewelry and makeup and tattoos and all the things that humans do that they don't have to do. I love that line. None of those things have survival benefits in the obvious sense. They're things we do to something in our mind, to change our mind in some way. So what does art do? Why do we like it? I have a phrase in the book that children learn through play and adults play through art. And I think that's really what it does.
Beautiful.
Isn't it?
I just want to say, Brian Eno, marry me.
Yeah. No, he is something. He is someone I've looked up to for a long, long time.
Amazing.
I was in the music business, and I never did meet him. I met a lot of great people, but that music for airports. I tell everybody, if you want to get absorbed into a piece of music where there's a piece of music that's projecting peace, big time. You know?
No, and now the movie about him where you never see the same thing twice, it's using AI.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that.
Oh, yeah, there's a movie, a doc out on him where you never see the same, literally, you never will see the same movie twice.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow,
but I love, having started in fashion, I totally love what he's saying about the cardigan, the lipstick, the tattoo, because it was always, I always saw fashion as an art form, a way to express yourself, which is the way Susan and I believe or define art is any medium that allows you to express yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you each give us, audience and myself, a little bit of background as to the things that you gravitated towards when you were just in school and then about to become an adult, and what turned you on to this particular path, the path both of you have been on a very, very purposeful path in your work, and we'd like to hear about it. Susan, you want to start?
Sure. So I think for me, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. There's a lot of birthing and things that are opening up in new ways. And I'm an introvert. I'll start there. I've never been like a big speaking person, although it's funny with the work that Ivy and I are doing now and the work in the lab, you have to find that part of your voice to be in conversation in that way. But I think I've always understood humans through what they make and what they do as their essence. Like it's always just been intuitive for me. And so I wouldn't have called it art necessarily, but just how we make and how we perceive each other is just been through like someone giving you some kind of food that they made, or my grandmother was a knitter and a crocheter, and she showed herself through those kinds of things. I've told the story that really hit home for me in a health form when my twin sister had an accident that she lost the ability to speak about what had happened to her. And now we know the Broca region of the brain shuts down in trauma. And she started to draw. And that was how she was able to piece together and to actually exercise literally what was stuck inside of her, just fear trapped inside of her. And I think it came home for me like, oh my gosh, this is, we communicate so deeply in other ways besides speaking, and especially when you couldn't speak. But I would say one other thing is that I've always been like an innately insatiable, curious person, and I just love life, and so I just want to understand it, and it shows itself up in all of these ways of expression, creative expression, and I'll say including nature. Nature is like something that I've always found great solace in and joy in.
That's great. You just reminded me of something when you talked about your mother. I'm not sure who it was, knitting, or maybe
my grandma.
Your grandma. So it's just a cute little story. But Ram Dass was teaching somewhere. He taught all the time, and I guess part of the conversation was about, was referencing psychedelics and consciousness, which he, obviously talked about quite a bit. So he's going on, and he notices an older woman in the audience, because at that time especially, it was not all, but mostly young people, hippies and so on. And he noticed this woman and just attentively, into it. And so the talk was over, and the woman comes up to him just to say hi, I'm sure. And he said, I saw you throughout the whole thing nodding to everything I said, as if you completely, understood it and were at one with it. He said, he was like surprised, just, I don't know. I'm sure he was quite polite about it. She said, he might have even asked her if she had taken a psychedelic or something. No, nothing. And, well, what do you do? And she said, it's a famous line, I crochet. And he was, of course, mind blown. And the reality is that what you put yourself completely into and at one with is absolutely art, whatever she was creating, and it got her into that at one-ment with the universe in the moment. I mean, it was an incredible practice, and it combines what you guys have been talking about in this book.
It's personal, right? Like it could be crocheting for her, it could be gardening for somebody else, it could be I'm a collager. It's personal, and like we're all talking about personalized medicine and precision medicine, and the arts are probably the most personalized medicine that there is.
Yeah, right. That's right on. Ivy, what about you coming up through your youth?
Through my youth, my dad was a designer, a car designer.
Really?
My home was filled. I worked on the Studebaker, the 1955 Hawk. But the house was filled with materials. And in fact, it was so ahead of its time, Andy Warhol made a movie in it, because it was a very futuristic house I lived in a futuristic world.
New York?
In New York, in the Bronx, in Riverdale. But so my world, and my dad taught me how to see things beyond what they appear to be. Since I was a little girl, he'd say, look up at that light, not in a spiritual way that I developed on my own, but in a tangible, Ivy, look at the way that light is reinforced into the wall. What else can be hidden that way? Like how to extrapolate, look at everything and pay attention to what gets your attention, and then really see how to apply it. And I loved, he was very inspiring to me, but my parents would fight and I didn't really understand them. So I'd close my door. I started to play an African drum when I was little. I got very into music. I realized I had to get into a zone, a flow state very early on to maintain my sanity and keep more of myself inside, because I wasn't relating to some of the family dynamics. And so I was an extremely creative kid, very curious. I've studied vibration, sound, and because I studied Jungian psychology, once I understood kind of what happens in your mind or outside your mind, I really wanted to understand what happens between us. So started studying vibration and sound. Mm-hmm. And my career, my work got in museums when I was in my 20s because I was inventing new techniques using metal. I was a metalsmith in the beginning.
Oh, really?
And I would ask questions. Susan and I found out we're actually very similar, the artist and the scientist, and I'm typecasting us because we're both. But we're actually very similar because we ask questions, a lot of questions. So I think I invented these new techniques because I was relentless in the studio asking questions and spending hours with myself until I could figure out the answer. But I realized I had more ideas than I had fingers. And that's when I went from being a craftsman to a designer and started my journey working for a variety of companies, running design and product development, everything from head of design for the girls' toys at Mattel to Calvin Klein, Coach, Swatch Watch, and now Google for the last 11 years. So it's always I've always been a maker, a builder. And when Susan reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it was...
Oh, you didn't know each other?
No, she ran the Arts and Mind Lab. We just connected 5 years ago, Susan, 6 years ago. And it was a cold call of LinkedIn. And she said, I get like 300 LinkedIn invites and I always swipe left. All of a sudden I see the Arts and Mind Lab, my two favorite things, art and the mind. And I said, I swiped right. And she said, I've been following your career for 25 years. I said, that's called stalking. And she said, no, hear me out. And so we made time to get on a call together. And what was a 30-minute appointment went to 3 hours because we found we were so similar in our perspectives. And she said, we now have the research to back up what you've always known intuitively. And at first, when she told me the research, I was like, yeah, of course, I know that. That's why I do what I do. And I said, but wait a minute. Oh my God, the world does not know this. And the fact that there's now the science to validate it. And then she said, well, I've always wanted to do these salons. And I said, well, let's do one in my home. And so we had a salon she brought her neuroscientists and we curated, I called it Noah's Ark, because two of everything, two dancers, two musicians, two painters, two singers. And we spent the day having these artists or creatives in conversation with the neuroscientists. And at the end of it, we're cleaning up. And she said, I've always wanted to do a book about this. And I said, this is the book I've been waiting for. And so that's how we ended up collaborating on this book.
We met in 2017 because Ivy just had a birthday. And Heather, a book of our first date. I went back and I found the LinkedIn that I sent her and what sent me. It was like we were like dating. It was just amazing. And it's like 30 more minutes. Yeah, 30 more minutes. And I mean, it's great when you fall in love with other people, like truly. And I think we do that throughout our lives. And just the way that has just stuck and we're just growing, but the thing that has been so interesting to me about the salon is that it's really hard to bring different sectors together. We have been taught to silo our lives, right? There's the scientist, the artist, maybe the public health, the doctor. They don't come together. And that's not how it used to be. It used to be that, these things were, you were a philosopher and a painter and, a healer. And I think bringing people together, our languages are different. Our defenses are honed, but in this space, when you kind of neutralize that and you say, we asked this one question, we wanted an icebreaker, right? We were really like at the beginning of our journey. And so we came up with this question and we thought it'd be like 10 minutes. Has there ever been a time in your life when the arts or aesthetic experiences have affected you or somebody you knew? And literally hours later, people were going around the room telling us stories about how they had dyslexia and their mom suggested that they do film. Someone else the funder believed that their home made them successful and changed the environment, the enriched environment. Other people talked about theater, about photography, all of this mental health in the family. And we realized that when you are what I call solution science, when you're really looking at what problems you're trying to solve for, all those differences matter because people come from a different perch. And so then you bring the best of everybody together to solve a problem through the lens of the arts and aesthetic experiences. And that's really what the book is illustrating, is all the ways of knowing, the research from indigenous cultures to neuroscientists, to sociologists, to artists, to dancers that figured out before the researcher did that if you dance, you can address Parkinson's disease. And, so it's like, it's not the scientist coming down and saying, I got the answer. It's really, artists have always known this, right? And science is catching up with the artist and more. So it's an incredibly generative work. And it's just showing up in every sector of society too.
You talked a little bit about vibration, and there's a beautiful thing in the book where you put two tuning forks together off of Puck. Which of you did?
I did it. Yeah. I was.
And you really, to a colleague who was in some kind of anxiety, that just completely changed in that moment, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, for me, it's music. And that vibration, I absolutely know without neuroscience or anything, just absolutely know that it changes your moment instantly.
Well, do you know one of my teachers, because I've studied sound and vibration and music for so many years, was explaining one of the reasons why we're so profoundly affected by music is when we're in the womb and we are a very small mass floating in all this liquid, and water and bones amplify sound. He was able to he made a recording of what it sounds like when we are in the womb. We're hearing our mother's heartbeat because it's amplified like 10,000 times is the drums. The digestive system is the string section. We are literally swimming in a sonic bath for what they say is 9 months of our happiest times because we're just chill, right? So no wonder we come out. And until I heard this, of what we're surrounded with, which is pure sound at all different kinds of sound. No wonder we're so emotionally reactive, to different sound and frequencies. And if we're all vibration, right? So everything is vibrating atoms. And so when I first got into studying sound because I read about a man in France that was bombarding. He was a jazz musician, but he was now bombarding cancer cells with musical notes under a microscope, and it's like finding the resonant frequency. And they would dance together and then they would break each other up. And I could tell I get a certain chill when something is true. And luckily my career in design afforded me the luxury of having the money to go hop on a plane and study with him in France. So the curiosity in me, I would ask a question like, how could this be? And I would have the wherewithal to go down the rabbit hole until I understood it.
You're talking about sound resonance, and we're seeing that show up like with Alzheimer's disease. So literally sound and light in this case creating this alchemy that literally helps to break apart amyloid and have that move out of the brain into sort of the waste of how we dispose of waste in the brain. And so it's showing this idea of resonance and vibration and frequency is kind of the center of the universe, right? And we've not ever thought about using this in service of humanity. I love going back to Brian Eno, where it's really, it isn't, I think the arts are part of our survival. I think without them, we don't live well. We get disease. We don't make connections. I think part of the reason that the world is suffering so much is that we've forgotten that we actually do need this for survival.
Well, I think we've been focusing on productivity and efficiency and pushing these arts aside as a nice to have, not as an imperative to our health and wellness. And through the work on this book with Susan and learning some more about the physiology of how we are wired to receive the sensorial nature of life, it's no wonder when we deprive ourselves of that, why we're in the state we're in, especially where mental health issues are bigger than even physical health issues.
Yeah. So I have a great example of what vibration can do. And I was, everybody's heard this story more than
We
a few
haven't.
times. But you haven't, and it's important in relation to this subject. I think I was maybe 17. Somebody snuck me into a club in Montreal, where I'm from. And John Coltrane was playing.
Love him.
Yes, we do. Anyhow, I loved jazz. I was not listening to rock and roll at that time and at a very young age. So suddenly he starts to play my favorite things on soprano saxophone. I mean, with the beauty of the whole gamut of emotions. I mean, he, as you know, and as you've heard, when that happened, went out of, I had no idea. Was not meditating. I was not doing anything those days. This was before I woke up a little bit. And there I was without any idea of what was in my surroundings whatsoever. I mean, it's something that was so powerful that I can recall it like this in a day, the same way I can recall Neem Karoli Baba when I went back with Ramdas. And that, now before that, music meant a lot to me to this day. But that moment gave me the idea, wow, everything can become integrated into an interconnected one. Through, I didn't intellectualize that at the time, but looking back on it, that's what happened. That gave me the ground to grow from. It was that
beautiful moment. And that was at an early age.
17, maybe. Not even 18, I don't think. Yeah.
You should put that on your life playlist that you play, when you can't get out of the chair, and it'll take you back, right? It'll just open up that moment instantly.
Yeah. Well, I do it enough on the podcast, so I'm,
Oh, you do? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's new to us, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I think we should talk a little bit about neuroscience and the reality of being able to the neuroplasticity and the availability. We can change these habits, these the neurotic tendencies that we all seem to have a lot of. We can do that, and here is a methodology that everybody, almost everybody I know, some way is relating with art. And that doesn't mean going to a museum and seeing a painting, way beyond that. But can you talk about neuroplasticity and neuro arts?
Well, maybe I'll start, Ivy, and you can jump in.
Yep.
So,
Susan, can you do one thing just back off the mic a little bit.
Okay. Usually I'm not loud enough. So anyway,
you're
okay,
perfect.
good.
You're perfect.
Okay. Thank you. So I think that neuroplasticity is the closest thing to a miracle that we've only really known about for the last 50 years, right? And it really was a woman, Marion Diamond, who was the initial pioneer in seeing how enriched environments changed our brains. And interestingly, the men in the room, which mostly there were men in the room at that time, scientists, gave her a lot of shit. Like they didn't believe her. They didn't think it was true. But what she saw was that brain structure got larger in enriched environments and it got smaller in deprived environments. And it's taken us, 60 plus 70 years to really start to use that, like in design. Ivy's such a pioneer in design because she uses this idea of enriched environments and shapes and spaces and how they make us feel as opposed to this functional, practical idea. So neuroplasticity literally is based on salient experiences, and arts by their very nature are salient experiences, change the ways that our neurons connect to each other. So you're born with about 100 billion neurons and they connect at a synaptic level. And what we now know is those synapses create neural pathways, and those pathways connect all the different parts of the brain and body and are activated simultaneously depending upon the stimuli. And so we have this ability to rewire ourselves based on these stimuli. So you're talking about John Coltrane. You rewired your system, and that could have been certainly your limbic system, but also your vestibular system, your saliency network, your auditory cortex. You were literally your memory, so your hippocampus. You were literally changing your very core structure in an experience listening to a musician. And at the same time, you're creating these new connections. You're also pruning the connections that are no longer valuable to you, right? That no longer serve you. And sometimes I think of it as a health behavior. You're building a habit as you're changing behavior. And habits do take time, but there are some things that we do that are instantaneous, that like literally rewire you forever, and you never see the world in the same way again. And these arts experiences, I went and saw Alvin Ailey at the Kennedy Center years ago, and I couldn't believe it. It was so beautiful and so fluid, and I still sit up straighter and feel lighter when I think about that moment, right? It changed me forever. And 35, 40 years ago. So neuroplasticity is like, to me, the secret of humanity. We change. We can change. And that we can change means anything's possible. And it doesn't matter, where you start from. So to me, this is a way of thinking about quality of life. And no matter what your circumstances are, we have the ability to be different.
Yeah.
And the key is putting yourself in those situations in front of confronting yourself with a new piece of art, or picking up crayons or a pencil that you've never, and just starting to express yourself. Because whether you're the maker or the receiver of an art modality, it has a profound effect on you. So, the sad thing is we've been shut down. We come in as pure soul and are as children, and we want to express ourselves, and we play. And, the definition of play is doing something different than we do every day, but without a preconceived outcome. And that's key, because I think right now we are so outcome driven. And I love what Brian Eno said, because play through art, because this idea that you're doing something without any end destination or goal allows you to play with ideas, play with concepts, play with how does putting blue on top of green and red, what happens to it? And you're asking all kinds of questions, and you're being curious, and your mind is making new connections. So it's actually such a gift that we now know that everything we do and confront ourselves with, if it has an emotional charge or we respond to it, it's like laying down new roadways in our brain. It's a great gift.
And the idea of the default mode network is also kind of another piece of that, because we're bringing in all this information, all this content that's changing us, really changing us. And that's great. But then when we stop bringing in that information and we allow ourselves to hit the pause button and to really process that, so it could be meditation, mindfulness, it could be walking in nature, it could be just turning off the world switch for a minute. Our default mode network helps us to understand who we are, what it means to us. Meaning making, I think, is also something that the arts do so amazingly. So what do we care about? What about mind wandering and daydreaming? What do I think is beautiful? What doesn't give me beauty? And so we're such a reactive world. What if we could really respond based on our sense of feeling by processing all of these amazing inputs that are changing us? And so that's where the default mode network is so important. And we don't teach that. We're constantly like, respond. But what if we just sat with it?
React.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why, it's for what we are doing, meaning me as part of Love Serve Remember Foundation, Ram Dass's, and all the teachers that we represent. People, we encourage, of course, practice. Mindfulness, meditation, chanting, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. And there's always a little bit, especially we do in-person retreats, so like I'll sit with people just having a meal or something, you get to know people and what their concerns are. And one of them is about, I can't really change. I've been like this forever, and part of that is due to tremendous, of course, attachment to the story one tells oneself and the thoughts we believe in. So we address that best we can. But the idea that it has been proven scientifically through neuroscience that we can change. Things can change. And for people that really, for instance, respect in particular, the Tibetan lamas, of which there are many, many wise lamas that travel around and teach and so on, and that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama Institute, was really part of investigating through science the realities that the Tibetans had established through centuries and centuries, and how it was all lined up, just kind of perfectly. So for people to be able to so people like there's one Lama, Mingyur Rinpoche is his name. He was one of the first to go in and is it Richie Davidson, I think.
I know him.
Yeah. So he did those first experiments with fMRI. Is that the right machine? And Mingyur was one of the first participants, rather. And they said to him, okay, would you just meditate for a moment on compassion? And they said, usually it takes, a normal person or even a normal monk, whatever that is, some time before that can happen. This guy, boom, he went. Of course, his father was one of the greatest meditation masters in Tibet, in the last 200 years. But it proved to people that this is real. This can happen. And that gives a little bit of hope.
I often reference, it was when the Dalai Lama's, this idea of how important science is to make concepts viable in society, and often use the example of when with science and meditation really caught on, because I've been doing it for 40 years, once they were able to show and in the Dalai Lama's brain as well, that something is changing. Actually, that change is happening. And then people pay attention. So, now we're doing the same thing. And now that there's equipment that you don't have to open up your brain to see what's going on in it, it's a wonderful contribution, because we can see what happens in an MRI machine when someone's playing the guitar. Even the difference between, you'll appreciate this because you like jazz music, playing improvisational music versus kind of scripted music. It lights up different parts of your brain, and the improv lights up more parts of your brain. And so we can actually see the direct relationships of what these various art disciplines is doing for us.
I also think it's true that I like what you said about practice, because change requires practice, and you don't, so you have to continue, and change can be to really hardwire those changes, not to go back to old patterns. I think of food as a really good example, where if you're, somebody who has food addictions, and it's really food, food is like one of those weird things where you have to have food, and food is an art, right?
Weird thing, yeah.
Right? And so it's an art, it's something you have to have, but you have to learn how to change your behavior, and it's a practice. So, maybe you use a smaller plate, or, maybe you pick a different kind of food, but it's not, it takes time, and it takes intention. And I think that's another thing that's really important. It takes intention. What's really great about the arts is time and attention, and doing something that's hard. That's like, to me, I think exercise. But the thing about the arts is that the arts are joyful. They release oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, neuroepinephrine, sometimes adrenaline. And so your body does this very amazing thing that gives you the motivation through reward. And so there are a lot of other things that push change, that provide you with those kinds of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters to help you make change. So when I work with people in recovery or addiction or trauma, other, things that then something needs to change, the arts make it easier. And God, how great is that? Like, not everything has to be hard for it to be good.
Yeah, because we've been we are literally wired to be in the arts. I mean, in ancient cultures, and we interviewed some indigenous tribes, there was no word for art. They sang, they danced, they painted in caves. I mean, that was how they lived their lives. I mean, the same thing with, Tibetans, Buddhists, the art, the beauty, the sand painting. I mean, it was just part of life. And I think, Susan and I were trying to question, like, so what happened? And I think it was when art became a commercial thing that was, judgment. It's good art, it's bad art. All of a sudden, people stopped doing it, or you didn't continue doing it or playing music, unless you were going to be a musician or a professional dancer, because you're never going to earn a living at it. Not realizing by putting those things aside, we're really doing damage to our brain and body.
Yeah. And the value, we stopped valuing the arts because we said the age of reason, right? If it's not logical, if it doesn't make sense, if we don't know it, we couldn't allow for, I think, the generative nature of the arts. And then we started to say, well, the only thing that matters is if, someone else thinks it has some kind of monetary value. And those judgments really not just shut people down, but I think shamed a lot of people and stigmatized us, so that we sort of slowly, as a culture, as a species, have really stopped making art in all of its forms. And, we see it in schools. It's an easy place to look, right?
Yeah. Oh, boy. I love this chapter, Develop Rituals to Rewrite Your Inner Script, which we've been alluding to here. And let me just read a little bit. I mean, so this is, again, back to the the idea that, yes, you can change, have some, what Roshi Joan Halifax would call wise hope, it can be. And so it's hard to change a habit, extraordinarily difficult. We tend to do things the same way we always have because neuroplasticity cuts both ways. Our routines create neural pathways, which create habits of mind, even when those habits and routines are not always good for us. If you want to enhance flourishing, you can't accomplish this by doing the same thing in the same way. As the writer Annie Dillard wrote, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. This is very important. Holistically for everything that we're involved with. I mean, the arts being a way to cut through that kind of attachment to control, rational, patriarchal vibrations, which we seem to be in quite strongly these days. Right?
I have this quote that is in my over top my desk that says, if we take care of the moments, the years take care of themselves. And I mentioned that because I think right now, living moment by moment, and I mean sometimes minute by minute, second by second, is how you make hard change and how you live through difficult moments, right? Difficult situations. And the sacredness of the moment, if you take care of the moments, the years take care of themselves. They add up, right? It's the other side of what Annie Dillard says. And so making it very concrete and maybe I'm just thinking about the aesthetic mindset.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah, I was going to say one of the things, when people say, well, how do I even get into this place where I open myself up? Because as you were talking about neuroplasticity, we just tend to do the same things and we keep digging the pathways deeper and deeper. And it's like when your wheel gets cut in the mud and you keep putting your foot on the gas and you can't get out because it's easier. It's what you know. And that's why it takes courage to just step outside of that and try something new. But,
and you can be in crazy pain and still continue because it's comfortable.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing what comfort, but by stepping out. So we talk about this thing, the creative mindset, which is, I think, the way Susan and I, and we made that up ourselves because we talked about how we walk around in the world, and we walk around the world really looking at everything. Like I'm looking out my window, the way the sunlight just hit the leaves of this incredible tree I have and how many different colors of green lit up, and then watching, like paying attention to what gets your attention and really looking at, and aesthetics are all those things that are alive in your senses, which is why nature is the most aesthetic place. You go out in nature and you've got temperature, sound, shape, color. And so by being in this aesthetic mindset of appreciating and looking at everything in your space and changing just simple things like putting one flower in a vase, like just starting to change, because changing your space changes the way you think. And so as a way to get into getting out of some ruts and creating new pathways, or buying a coloring book, and it sounds silly, but starting to color outside the lines or inside the lines, I just think this idea of being curious, paying attention, and being playful with, I think we're here each to live only the life that we're supposed to live. We think we have to be a certain way, and I think we're born with our own stories that we have to unfold. But sometimes we go off track. We're not even paying attention to that because we're so caught up in how everyone else is and what we think we should be doing.
Or reacting to everything you see on your television or on your screen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You mentioned Dacher Keltner, who I know who he is. I met him once, I believe, with our friend.
The Center for Greater Good at Berkeley.
Yeah. I think I met him with Danielle. And,
yeah. She knows him. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he talked about awestruck, and you quoted him in awe is embedded in our DNA. And awe alters your mind from self-centered. This caught me, one of the highlights of the book. Awe alters your mind from self-centeredness to community-centric, making you feel more pro-social and breaking down me versus them thinkings.
Well, I think when we're in awe of a sunset or that extraordinary moment in the sky is when we realize there's things bigger than us and we are part of something bigger, because you realize the vastness, and then all of a sudden the ego dissolves and you're just in that space with everything else. And I think when you have those moments, it changes your cellular structure, and we just have to create more of those moments for ourselves. Because I know some of my friends and I, all we could do in this moment in time is to go more inside. I think it's calling for us to go more inside and do our own individual work, because you have to block out what's going on sometimes in the outer world.
Well, there's
sometimes,
also something.
Yes.
Sometimes meaning this time in particular. I mean, I think it's the right thing to have a healthy balance, but at this moment in time.
What really struck me in this particular quote in the book, altering one's mind from self-centeredness to community-centric. So to put a little, we have a new book from Ram Dass actually coming out, first posthumous book where we went back into the catalog with a theme that Mirabai Bush, who has done a lot of extraordinary work in her life with community and mindfulness. She thought of this title, There Is No Other.
That's good.
So it's coming out literally in a couple of weeks. Here we're in October 21. And, just this thing of us and them, which is obvious. I mean, it's just so transparently obvious of what's going on. And the reality of how we deal with this is really quite something. I tell people that I have known for decades who have done spiritual work on themselves. And I say, we have this new book, just like I just shared with you. There is no other, Ram Dass. And they generally, I'll give you one particular person, this woman friend of mine. She said, that's great. But maybe they ought to, she described some potentially off-the-wall violent act before she was going to accept the reality of there is no other. In other words, she was saying,
"Oh wow, I see what you're saying.
There is another. No matter what you say, no matter what Ram Dass says about all of this, there is that. This is what seems to me is really a creeping, poisonous thing."
Yeah. Well, I believe in the tension of opposites. And right now we are so at the height of it that I've got to believe it's going to propel us. The only place to go is to start to accept that we are all connected and there is no other, because then we would start behaving differently and treating each other differently, because there is no other. It's a great title. And I'm so glad you did that, because I miss having, Ram Dass books.
Sometimes when you have these small, like a book, an idea, a person, I think we all sometimes feel like this with climate change, where what can I do? It's such a big problem. Like I think what's happening right now in this country in particular, it's such a big energy force. But all of these small, beautiful things, start to create a rhizome. They start to connect each other, and that creates something big. And I think that, it feels dire sometimes and you feel like you got to defend. But the more you open up your heart to awe and to wonder, and you mentioned ritual, I think that ties into this too. There are many communities that don't have a word for art because it's how they live their lives.
Oh, wow.
And I think if they're sacred rituals, right? The Hopi, we had an opportunity to talk to a Hopi leader, and there's 29 ways that corn shows up in a culture. Like thinking about I was going to say lowering the temperature, but not even lowering the temperature, creating a new temperature, a new way to be. Like it's not about resistance, it's about growth. And I'm seeing it in my work with neuro arts all over the world. Like there are millions of people doing what we're talking about right now, and they're coming together, and that it's getting stronger. Like the book, I think, really did ignite a movement. People started to figure out it was everywhere. And I just feel that growing. Like there isn't a one thing that's going to solve this. I think it's all going to solve it if we keep in our practice, in our rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this quote, I think it's art creates community and community creates culture. And so if we're going to change the culture, starting with art and bringing together community, and often the murals on the outside of a wall in the city that tell the story of the community. I mean, there's ways that dance, singing together brings the community together, meditating together. We just have to start doing that to really all begin to embody this idea that there is no other.
Yeah.
And keep doing it. Yeah. And then the last part of that is, and community creates humanity, right? And so, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And we've been having, when Ram Dass was still alive in Maui, we gathered there with him, fairly large retreats, and people just shared that, that extraordinary vibration when you are not thinking about yourself so much, right? As we talked about before.
Yeah, I think... Yeah. People need to have, who feels it, knows it. Those of us who have had those moments, the experiences where you dissolve.
That was Bob Marley, who feels it, knows it.
Yeah. But, you had that early experience, even through music. I had an out-of-body experience where I felt like what it felt like to be just pure spirit swimming in a soup of unconditional love. I mean, and that's how we are all connected and we are all one. And so I am very grateful that I had that experience early on, because I see the world differently through a different pair of eyes now. But there's so many ways to get to that place. And if you feel it just once, I think it's...
Everybody, I am sure, has a once.
Yeah,
Everybody.
I mean, they've got to
dismiss
experience
it,
once.
like from my era, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s and all that, as a hippie, I mean... Then they grow up and go, oh, that was just some, youthful blah, blah, and that's not true. That is not true. So there's a great part of the book towards the end where you're talking about humanity began with firelight, okay? So people started gathering around a fire. This really strikes me. I'm going to have to make sure I'll tell you about what we did with a Ram Dass track, actually, an audio track. But what I really love, the pragmatism of the day made way for the mystery and evocative nature of night, as fire fostered new forms of coming together. We created stories, we sang, we danced, we developed myths and metaphors that passed on the moral and ethical value of the group, values. We celebrated and we mourned. We began to sing and move together. And these moments of shared emotion and sound forged bonds, collective transcendence and communal joy. If that ain't what it's all about, I don't know what is. So
that's one of my favorite sentences. It's one of my all-time favorites. And but think about it. Darkness makes you vulnerable,
right?
And light we always move towards the light, right? And so there's something about fire and heat and warmth that, and also, at the end of the day, I just think that continues to be true will continue to be true through humanity, right? Through to the end of time, that is our most vulnerable moment. And what do we choose to do with it? We have a choice, right? And to sing, to dance, to tell stories, to figure out what is our value and values. And, this is where tribalism really began, because not every fire shared the same story, right? The different culture, different physical environments. Yeah. So we became different tribes that connected on the Silk Road, right? And started to share their things with each other. And so, I think different is good in that way too.
Yeah. So what we did, Ram Dass, in some talk, so we have musicians that are taking Ram Dass, more of the poetic pieces or the meditative pieces, and putting it with their music. And one of them was, who's done a tremendous job, is he's called East Forest.
Oh, sure, I know him.
Oh.
Yeah.
In fact, he has stayed in my home in Santa Fe.
No.
And years ago, a great story about, I hired him for a Google holiday party 12 years ago.
Oh my.
And you can ask him about this. And when he was not really into the things he's in today, but he had images that went with his music. And I put him in it was a banquet hall, I'll never forget. And then I watched his career just grow. And he's become a friend. So yes, I know
that's
him
so
well.
Great! Wow, the world is
and I
small,
know
isn't it?
he did some things with Ram Dass's words. I have all of that.
Well, he went and interviewed Ram Dass in Maui, and I discouraged him because I said Ram Dass has aphasia, that might be hard to integrate into a song or whatever, and he just pushed. I said okay, because I like what he was doing, and he went over there and he did interview him or just record chats and turned it into this phenomenal record. But he did one other thing, and this was pre-stroke Ram Dass, and he did a track with John Hopkins, who is a close person to Brian Eno, and it was centered, or that's why I got struck by this. It's called "Sitting Around the Fire." It is such a beautiful track. You guys, I'm going to put the show notes, people, okay? You got to put a link to that song for everybody who listens to this podcast. It's
called Around the Fire.
Sit Around the Fire.
Sit Around the Fire.
John Hopkins, yeah.
Okay, we should definitely listen to that.
Oh, no, you will love it, both of you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm going to have to hop off to another call.
We're good. We're about an hour into it. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to have you both here, Ivy, Susan. Great to meet you. And everybody else, we'll see you next week on Mindrolling on the Be Here Now Network. And just go to Be Here Now Network /Mindrolling, and you'll catch, we'll get a link to Your Brain on Art and everything else we've been talking, maybe even John Coltrane.
Somewhere over the rainbow. Put that on there.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.